Hello students, welcome to this series on advertising. Today we are going to study the legal aspects of advertisements in India. Now let us study the objective of this module. The basic objective is to study the legal aspects of advertising in India and the regulatory framework under Constitution of India for the freedom of press and media. Now let us study the Advertising Standards Council of India, that is ASCI. Advertising market as a whole is regulated and controlled by a non-statutory body, the Advertising Standards Council of India ASCI. In the absence of uniform integrated legislation, it is necessary for advertisers to ensure that an advertisement is in compliance with all the local and the national advertisement laws. Now, since the industry is very diverse and very wide, so one law cannot govern the whole industry. So, a non-statutory body is framed which generally give certain guidelines and standards so that the ads work in compliance with those standards. Role of Advertising Standards Council of India. ASCI is a voluntary self-regulatory council established in 1985 to promote responsible advertising, to ensure truthfulness, to ensure that advertisements are not offensive to caste, creed and culture. It safeguards against indiscriminate promotion of products regarded as hazardous to society or to individuals. So, this body is promoting honesty and truthfulness so that the society is developed in a way where hazardous products are not promoted. It is duty of responsible advertising industry to promote advertisements which are to improve the standards of life of people and which are in national interest. Laws governing media. The basic laws which govern media are the Press Council Act of 1978, the Cable Television Network Rules of 1994, Code for Commercial Advertising on Doordarshan and All India Radio, Electronic Media Monitoring Center EMMC, Norms for Journalist Conduct issued by the Press Council of India, Code of Conduct of the News Broadcasters Association. Now, because advertising is impacted by various other industries, that is, the ads cannot be floated individually because they are a part of media, they are a part of products, they are a part of national economy and they are also regulated by the Companies Act because it is a business system which is operating in our economy. So, from all industries and all aspects, these laws impact the industry. Now, let us study the products and services banned from advertising. The cigarettes and other tobacco products, Prohibition of Advertisement and Regulation of Trade and Commerce Production, Supply and Distribution Act of 2003 prohibits all direct and indirect advertising of tobacco products in all media. So, this law basically prohibits hazardous products to man's life in all media, that is, publicly you cannot advertise cigarette, and even if you are selling cigarette, it has to give the warning that smoking is hazardous to health. So, after giving the warning on packaging and all, then only the products are in the market, but they are prohibited from advertising under the Regulation of Trade and Supply Act of 2003. The Transplantation of Human Organs Act of 1994. This law provides for the regulation of removal, storage and transplantation of human organs for the therapeutic purposes and for the prevention of commercial dealings in human organs. This law prohibits any advertising inviting persons to supply, supply any human organ for payment. That is the human transplantation, which is a recent development in this industry of 1994, prohibits advertising of any human organ on payment basis. That is, we cannot donate organs when you have life for any medical purposes. This kind is because on payment basis, if you start buying human organs, so most of the poor people will sell the parts of their body and that will be fatal. It is a kind of a suicide which you are committing. The Drugs and Magical Remedies, that is the Objectionable Advertisement Act of 1954. The Drugs and Magical Remedies Objectionable Advertising Act of 1954 prohibits advertisement of magical remedies of disease and disorders. Sometimes the drugs have the power of magically curing your body. So, this kind of hypnotizing to customers is prohibited, because they will take wrong drugs, they will not recognize what kind of disease they have. So, unless and until some expert is not prescribing the drugs, people cannot take drugs by seeing advertisement. So, under this act of 1954, all these drugs which are giving remedy to body in a faster way are prohibited for advertising. The prenatal diagnostic techniques, that is regulation and prevention of misuse, that is this is Act of 1994. The Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act of 1994 prohibits advertisements related to prenatal determination of sex. Now, this is when a mother is giving birth to baby. So, what gender is there, whether it is a baby boy or a girl, people want to know. And if there is a baby girl, they will go for abortion, because women in the society has been given an inferior position and she is considered as a burden on society. But imagine what is a society without females. So, gender sensitization is needed in this sector, and the advertisements related to recognition of diagnosis of sex before giving to birth of the baby is generally prohibited, and any advertisement from any doctor is considered illegal. The Price Chits and Money Circulation Schemes Banning Act of 1978. The Price Chits and Money Circulation Schemes Banning Act of 1978 prohibits advertisements related to price chit and money circulation schemes. So, this is the act where you try to collect money from people and go for lottery system, or you try to decide a open a chit and then give a lot of or a pool of money to people. But because the morality of people is less and they can do fraud to people. So, we have systemized organization where money is secured through the banking and the other financial sectors. So, no independent person can organize this kind of activity and organize their ads. So, this act of 1978 basically prohibits people to collect money from people and cheat. The Indian Medical Council Act of 1956. Under the Indian Medical Council, that is the Professional Code, Etiquettes and Ethics Regulation Act of 2002, issued under the Indian Medical Council Act of 1956, physicians are not allowed to advertise their services in any form or manner of advertising through any mode. So, any doctor who is giving services related to his profession is not supposed to do his advertising on national media and promote himself for commercial purposes. The Bar Council of India rules formulated under the Advocates Act of 1961. This enforces that advertisement ban and publicity rules governing law firms and websites. These rules were enacted and enforced to curb the false advertisement of lawyers to gain publicity to attract clients. Now, this is a very technical industry and we cannot invite people and promote people that you should land up in problems and then come to lawyers. We need a society which is systematic, which is law abiding. So, we will not promote this kind of advertisement on media where law firms will ask people to bring their cases and their problems and commercially make it popular. So, lawyers are prohibited from advertising their services under the Advocates Act of 1961. The Cable Television Network Rules of 1994. These are the advertising codes of Doordarshan and All India Radio. They are the norms for journalist conduct. They are the laws related to Press Council of India. So, all these organizations, they are covered under the Cable Act of 1994. They prohibit any advertisement directly or indirectly promoting production, sale and consumption of cigarettes, tobacco products, wine, liquor or other intoxicants. So, any council who is related to media, whether you are a journalist, you are working in radio or you are working in Doordarshan or you are working in Press of India, You are not supposed to advertise intoxicant or drugs or any tobacco products which are harmful for body. Human life is precious and we need to preserve the values of people, and we should not promote wrong products in society so as to kill their lives. Arms Act of 1959. Sale and purchase of such items requires a license from government authorities. Therefore, advertisements related to such products are not permissible in India under the Arms Act of 1959. Now, in certain conditions, people do require arms to safeguard their life, but this is under a license control, that is, the government will give you permission to keep any arms. So, if you are not required to keep arms and ammunition in your house, then why should people advertise these products in advertisements? So, this law of 1959 prohibits any industry which is related to the manufacturing of guns or any army products is not allowed to advertise their products on media. As per the Food Safety and Standards Act of 2006, no advertisement relating to the standard, quality, quantity or grade composition, and no representation concerning the need or usefulness of any food can be made which is misleading or deceiving or which contravenes provisions of this laws or rules and regulations made thereunder. Now, the Food Safety and the Standards Act of 2006 permits manufacturers to have a high quality control and get approval from food councils. That is, the FSSAI license is important before you promote any product in the market. This is to ensure that we are not giving poisonous products to the customers, or we are not giving expired products to the customers which can play with their life. So, the Food Control and the Safety Act of 2006 prohibits advertisements which generally you cannot advertise low quality products or which have some kinds of chemicals which can harm your body. The infant milk substitutes, feeding bottles and infant food. This is the Regulation, Production, Supply and Distribution Act of 1992, prohibits the advertising of infant milk substitutes or feeding bottles. This is the any product which is related to feeding babies, that is, mother's feed is the best feed for baby, because for 6 months a child when is born is not allowed to take water or is not allowed to take any external food. They have to be given mother's feed to build resistance in the body. So, any company which is manufacturing powdered milk or is in the line of manufacturing nipples or bottles, they are not allowed to advertise it commercially on national media, because this will play with the health of the children. So, we need to bring up babies with the pure touch of mother. So, this law is very important, where the manufacturers are not allowed to advertise a product. This is the Act of 1992. The Public Gambling Act of 1867 prohibits gambling activities in India. Public Gambling Act permits games of mere skill. This is, you cannot promote gambling games or casinos nationally advertised on TV, because this is a kind of activity where people will lose their money, people will lose their basic wealth which is needed to upbring their families. So, most of the speculations and the gambling activities are prohibited on national media. In April 2011, the Information Technology Act 2000 was also amended to ban internet gambling and online betting websites. So, these are the betting websites where people put their bet on cricket or other activities which are of national importance, maybe formation of government or any kind of activity which is taken in public life. So, these websites in a fraud way try to attract lot of money from people. So, this under this Act of Information Technology Act of 2000, these websites and this kind of gambling, online gambling is prohibited. The Lotteries Regulation Act of 1998, it gives power to the concerned state government to hold lotteries subject to the prescribed conditions. Under section 294A of the Indian Penal Code. Now, the Lotteries Regulation Act is generally prohibiting the public to advertise their lottery systems and give prize money to the people, but government under regulatory framework under the section 294A can bring up lotteries for people. The Prize Competition Act of 1955 controls and regulates prize competitions in certain parts of India and prohibits the advertisement of unauthorized prize competitions. Now, to win prize of 1 lakh rupees or 2 lakh rupees, people are going to invest, and people are going to invest their time, effort and money. So, these also activities invite lot of fraud. This kind of fraud has to be controlled on media, because media has to be very credible in terms of giving only standards and ethical practices. So, we cannot generally judge the morality of the people. So, under this Act of 1955, all the prize competition and acts are prohibited. Medical devices. The Central Drug Standard Council organization, that is the CDSCO, under the provisions of the Drugs and the Cosmetics Act of 1940, CDSCO functions includes regulating medical devices industry by approving for import, manufacture and sale of medical devices in India. Now, medical devices basically related to public health should not be advertised on national media, because people are not supposed to buy this. This is under doctor's prescription that goes to the hospitals and to the other medical labs. So, basically this Act of 1940 prohibits the commercial advertisement of the medical device and gadgets on national media. Medical services. An institution run by a physician for a particular purpose, such as maternity home, nursing home, private hospital, rehabilitation center or any type of training institution, etc., may be advertised in the lay press, but such advertisements should not contain anything more than the name of the institution, type of patients admitted, type of training and other facilities offered and the fees. Now, this is not a very attractive industry, that is medical services and rehabilitation centers are needed when people are in deep problems and when their body is dying. So, we cannot commercially promote this industry as a source of pleasure and invite people. You can just give information about the name, address and the service. So, this should not take the form of commercial advertising, and you should not try to spread that more people should land up in these problems and there are facilities available to cure you. Nutritional supplements. Nutritional supplements, it is regulated under the Food Safety and Standards Act of 2006. Now, most of the people are taking protein powders which are promoted through gyms to make their body more powerful. Now, giving this artificial power through protein which are synthetic and chemical based should not be advertised, and these are very poisonous for your body in long term. So, this Act of 2006 basically bans the advertisement of all the nutritional supplements, maybe it is calcium related or it is related to protein supplements. Occult psychic services. These services, they are not legally recognized in India and are not permissible under the Drugs and the Magical Remedies Objectionable Advertisement Act of 1954. Psychic services basically relate to the mental disease, mental illness, and the medicines related to this cannot be advertised because they can play havoc with the mind of the people. Over the counter drugs. The phrase over the counter drugs, that is OTC, has no legal recognition in India. All the drugs not included in the list of prescription only drugs are considered to be non-prescription drugs, that is OTC. Prescription only drugs are those medicines that are listed in the schedule H and X of the Drugs and the Cosmetic Rules of 1945. Now, there are two types of drugs which are taken under the prescription of the doctor, and over the counter drugs which are generally inhalers, wigs and little pain relievers. They are ointments which are externally apply to the body, but even these kinds of the drugs cannot be advertised on national media. The OTC drugs are not permissible in India, but in other countries OTC drugs are considered as a liberal way of buying. The Drugs and the Cosmetic Act of 1940. The Drugs and the Cosmetic Act of 1940 prohibits advertisement for any drug or cosmetic from using reports of test and analysis of the Central Drugs Laboratory or by a government analysis. So, this is, you are not going to advertise those drugs where the reports are given by government or any laboratory. We are not supposed to give the details of everything which is related to the testing or to the kind of the results which are being declared by government organizations or government laboratories, because drugs have both positive and both negative influence on the body. In situations where there emergency, how drugs can be used under regulated control is only the duty of the doctors. The Representation of the People Amendment Act of 1996. It prohibits advertisement for a period of 48 hours ending with the hours fixed for the conclusion of polling for any elections in a given polling area. Equitable opportunity to all political parties and candidates to have access to public advertisement space for election related advertisements during the election period. Now, this is the Representation Act of 1996, which generally prohibits advertisements of people before 48 hours. That is, you have to end up your commercial advertising 2 days before the elections commence in that particular area. This is to safeguard society for any recurrence of violence or any hatred among people, and media is not allowed to deny any person who wants to fight election and wants to give his advertisement. They have to give equal opportunity to all the parties and all the people who want to fight elections. Products related to sexuality. Advertisements related to sexuality are allowed with the provision that there should not be any indecent representation of women under the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act of 1986. Products must comply with the Drugs and the Cosmetic Act of 1940 and other certification rules under the Cable Television Network Rules of 1994. The media has to play that role, that gender sensitization is important and the respect of women has to be kept. So, no indecency has to be allowed in these kinds of ads. Indian Penal Code of 1860. Under the Cable Television Networks Rules 1994, Advertising Codes of Doordarshan and All India Radio and norms for journalist conduct issued by the Press Council of India, advertisement based on religion to hurt religious sentiments are not allowed. Also, advertisements may be punishable under the Indian Penal Code of 1860. If you are spreading hatred towards any specific culture or religion, these ads will be punishable under the Indian Penal Code Act of 1860. Now, let us study the prohibition of fraudulent and unfair trade practices relating to Securities Market Regulation Act of 2003. It prohibits fraudulent or unfair trade in securities if it involves an advertisement that is misleading or contains distorted information and which may influence the decisions of the investors is considered as fraudulent. So, security market under SEBI is highly regulated for commercial advertising. Now, let us study the summary of this lecture. In this lecture, we have studied the regulatory and the legal framework of advertising, where the Press Council Act and the other Food and Safety Acts and even the Companies Act of doing business all regulate the advertising industry, because advertising industry is creatively associated with many products and services sourced from many industries. So, they have to follow all norms from press and industry. Thank you, students.